Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? A little bit of local first today. I guess, yeah. It it doesn't sell itself quite as hard as a local first option as some of the alternatives. Um, I think because some of the other like local first isn't a huge differentiating factor within that within this like specific niche. Um, and also I don't know that local first is like a huge selling point outside of the niche. It has, I mean, in general, the architecture of local first can be beneficial in many cases, but the benefits aren't, they're not entirely obvious until you really dig into it and you have and meet specific use cases. But you can taking it all the way to local first isn't entirely beneficial to every use case, but there's pieces from it that are potentially like widely applicable. Jazz is what we're looking at today. It seems to have a pretty strong sync engine with encryption, user and team support sort of like baked into it. And I mean, I guess those are probably the two big things. But don't sell that short, because the fact that it does those is already kind of a big deal. Because all the other setups are sort of thinking of that, or have punted on the idea of uh, working towards a sync engine or something that qualifies as local first that has encryption and like the ability to share. So I've been wanting to look at Jazz for a while, and it's, I mean, honestly, the encryption and the team support is probably the major reason, because the only other library that we've looked at that is even like approaching this, I think, is what what auto merge is doing. I guess more so ink and switch, but eventually auto merge will have some ability to do this through another library called Keyhive, which is sort of like a separate stream of work that they've been more recently picking up, and at least more recently being more public about. So like that's also interesting, but this actually isn't a place that you can use it. And all the other options aren't out there, are more focused on the fact that like we can do the sync and we can do the all that stuff. But when you start talking in the context of an app, the encryption and being able to share is kind of an important piece these days. Being able to have like presence and understand when other people are working in things. So like if you're writing a document, the Google Doc I'm typing and somebody else is also working on this doc in a different paragraph nearby. It's kind of been done multiple times now, but the like user and sharing part of that is the hard part. So being able to have a presence sensor is one thing, but like all the idea of encrypting and not actually encrypting as in like end to end, I can't as a server owner see anything that the users are doing, and being able to share then between different users. So like end to end encryption is one thing, like one device is able to sync to my other device and they can only see it because it's encrypted. But then being able to share that, it's kind of in its own space at this point. I'm excited about other options that eventually come down the line, but like if you want to ship something now with this seems to be the only option. So okay, enough like going on about it. We're gonna flip right over, and I think what we do today is we basically just spin up a project and play around with it. It's in a place where I think they qualify it as there's no button on the top here. Oh, here, cloud. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for a pricing button. I'm like, there's no button. Yeah, so they I mean, you can quote get a starter API key, and you can actually pay for it. So like, it's at a point where you can pay for it, and it is supposedly open source fully to where you can, I like that little or your own nodes as a lower performance fallback. Yeah, so like you can go completely DIY, as in like, you can basically run their sync server on your own infra, which is kind of neat. But if you go to the starter, I just realized that it had a little like alert pop up. That's kind of funny. If you missed it, it just says during public alpha, all limits are lifted. Please use your email address as the API key. So at least if you're on this like starter level, you don't have, from what I can tell, you don't have any access to a dashboard or anything. You can't see, like the information around it is probably pretty minimal. I don't see a login button anywhere. Like if we would go here, same deal. But also it's a little bit different in that, like, if as a own, or like a somebody running a service, having access to the database and seeing the data is like a big part of the dashboard, and being able to see information about it. But if all you need is a thing to serve and sync, and you can't actually see any of the data anyways, like the only thing I could potentially care about is the active users. So I don't actually know that it needs too much of a dashboard. So I'm imagining at some point when they're out of there's a few things that say it's in public alpha. It seems like what I've seen from the more recent posts and whatnot, that like they don't specifically say public alpha too often. So if anything, I would say that they're getting closer to considering themselves outside of alpha. But we can kind of just try it out and use it, I think. So I think what we do today is we spin up a project. They've got the Create.js app. We'll probably spin one up and play around with it. They do have a bunch of options here, but as far as I can tell, there's a switcher up here. The Svelte seems to be a little bit further along, but like Vanilla.js is pretty much just the React docs. Honestly, the difference between React and React Native is probably pretty, at least as far as like using it, is probably pretty minimal. So I would probably qualify it as mostly React compatible at this point. But they have like the base core library, and they're building these like integrations on top. So they're in a place where they could potentially, in an official capacity, expand out to the other frameworks, I guess you'd say. So I think we spin up a React project. We just play around with it, and we kind of get a feel for it. I have looked at and played around with it a little bit, in part because the other projects that we've worked on stream, particularly the open source finance app that we've pulled in on stream a few times, I'm interested in using this project in that, but it would be in the context of like star effects, and that is kind of already handling the React context type stuff. So I don't necessarily need all the bits that the React library would pull along, which is why the vanilla JS was a thing that I was specifically looking at. But yeah, we can look at the implementation in React and the React, like how they set things up in the React context to get an idea of the core part of the library. But it is very much just documented for React at this point, is sort of the feeling that I'm getting. So I've looked at the like creating schemas and I played around with it a little bit, but I really haven't actually run a like full blown project with React using this app. So that's what we're gonna go through today. Let's go ahead. We're going to put it in our local first. Repository here. Pull. And I guess we do npx create. Cat's back. Seriously, I feel like it is literally. How long are we into the stream here? Yeah. Like every time I start streaming, like 20 minutes into the stream, 30 minutes into the stream. Hey, you. Yes, you. She knows what she's doing. Context. One of the cats licks my green screen, and then the whole green screen moves, and it just, that movement in the back, come on, just really bugs me. I think it's a combination of she does it because she knows it bugs me, but also I don't know. I think she likes just licking random stuff. She also licks the like sheer stuff on my daughter's dresses. The sheer material. I got nothing. Okay, so we will do an npx create jazz app. Yes. We are going to do React. Passkey auth. Now, I haven't looked specifically too much at the auth itself. So again, as far as what we would potentially want to see in a dashboard would be the users, but you don't have to use their users, or they're like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like authentication. Like user, like the SaaS part of user integration, like Auth0, clerk, whatever you call that. What do you? Okay, stop. No. Now the cats are being. We've got two. Okay. Anyways, the OAuth providers. Well, I guess OAuth providers is sort of an implementation detail, but like, I think that's what it's asking basically is they have a clerk integration, and then they also have their own like base level piece. Maybe this is a good thing to look at. When to use clerk? You need an User management system. That's probably a good word. I think that's the word I was sort of looking for here. You want you want to avoid users having to manage passphrases. So I'm curious what passphrase entails. And I'm not against potentially pulling in and using something like clerk. And also, like, the roles and the permissions could potentially be interesting, but I don't know how that works in the context of like the ability to share accounts and like share pieces of data. Yeah, so like here's the passkey auth. So I think what we'll do is, I think we'll try the passkey. Oh. So this is like the new, like literally the. For older browsers, we recommend using passphrase authentication. Okay, so this is actually like the web auth. Yeah, Face ID, Touch ID, which is probably a bigger deal on mobile because keys are managed by the device / operating system itself. Okay. We're going to try it. I don't know how it's going to work. In particular, because we're on Windows right now, I don't know what that's going to entail. So we're going to try it. It also says it's easiest to start with, which, I mean, if you're on Mac, I could probably see that because it's got, at least my laptop has like the built-in fingerprint reader thing. So that sort of all falls into that same bucket, I think. And it is pretty well integrated. I guess we just do npm. What do we name it? Jazz tools. No, we'll call it Jazz. Cat hair in my tongue. All right. Also, I'm not sure if this follows traditional. Yeah. Skipping get initialization. Thank you. Okay, so it does seem to follow traditional expectations here, where it creates a new folder. I don't know why it's running so slow. Now, I did actually, on a whole separate note here, I did actually spin up a new profile. So we have a stream profile right now, which, why aren't you zooming? Did they break the scroll wheel zoom? All right. Well, I mean, as a completely separate aside, oh yeah, we were playing around with an updated auto merge. So that was actually a couple weeks ago, and I completely forgot about that. We are going to, we're gonna give that a quick push here. So this was auto merge going to v3, right? I think so. All right, let's spin that up real quick. Get checkout -b auto merge v3, and we're going to stage that and git commit auto merge v3. And then we'll move back to the main branch and we'll worry about that soon enough. All right. So now, why is my Zoom not working here? View. Reset Zoom. Like, it used to be control. Alright, we're just gonna do this. I guess the other thing, control equals. So part of it too is the in switching into the keyboard, which you can see the keys I'm actually pressing in the corner there. Control, I don't have an equals on this layer. So what I made a new layer, but that didn't have a control. So then I put this, which actually I can do that. I can do this and this and go like this. And then the minus is awkward. Okay. I mean, we'll make it work. Yeah. So all the key, I mean, especially if they removed the zoom with the scroll wheel. So it used to be that you could hold control and zoom in this way. It doesn't seem to be doing that anymore, which is kind of frustrating. But we might need to spin up a new shortcut. Or, I mean, this works. Yeah, this works still. I don't know. I need to spend a little time on all my shortcuts is kind of what it comes down to, especially since the shortcuts that I had, I wouldn't say like I still have a normal keyboard. This usually sits on the computer that I'm not primarily using. So I do still, like a day job and whatnot, I primarily use this keyboard with a like split interface here. But yeah, I need to spend a little time to get all the keybinds and everything in a good place, especially since I'm using it across operating systems pretty consistently now too. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of cursor. I don't care about cursor, and I don't particularly care about Vercel either. I'm just gonna delete that. What do we got? What did it give us? We got some playwright in here. It's using Vite. It is on Vite 6, which is fine. There wasn't Vite 7 is out. They did it in a very appropriate way that you release a major version. V7 was just a handful of breaking changes, which is how you're kind of supposed to do it. But everybody uses it as like a marketing thing. It's a big number, it's like the first number. So like it feels like it should be a big deal that when you release a new version, but that's not how Semver is supposed to work by default. Anyways, it being a Vite 6 is not a big deal because all they did was drop like Node 18 support, I think. So we get some TypeScript, Tailwind, all that should be fine. I don't actually know that we need post CSS in here anymore. Okay, so it's and biome. Okay, so they got some biome in here. Interesting. For format and lint. Okay, I'm cool with that. So I'm not gonna say a default setup here, but a pretty solid setup as far as I'm concerned. All the stuff that they're using feels good to me. Now, So application name, where's that used? This identifies the app in the passkey auth. But they don't. Auth button. Import. Ah. That feels weird. It's like a circular dependency here. So they have a main and they have an app. The index.ts or index.html is pulling in and using main. Main is less of a. It's not a big deal, but like I honestly, I'm gonna change it just because it kind of bothers me. So there's the pattern of like if you're doing a React component, make it uppercase. Now, the one time that I don't follow that rule, it's not really like a hard and fast rule, but like the one time that I don't follow that is for the like main.ts tsx, because it's not a component that you can like pull in and use. This is the like a root piece. So yes, .tsx still makes sense, but it's not really a component per se. So I tend to prefer having main lowercase. Again, more semantics than anything. It doesn't matter that much. But either way, I'm going to move with this application name just because I don't like it there. The circular stuff is a bit bothersome. Then they have an API key here. I mean, like in theory, I don't think it actually matters. Like I think in theory we could use this and it would be just perfectly fine. But what I am going to do is make a I guess I just do like a config.ts. Again, all semantics, doesn't matter that much, but like keyboard was like not actually copying it appropriately. And then I want to pull out this into here. I think I'm okay with that. So I don't know. Let's call it and also I don't know that it actually allows special characters, but we'll find out. I'm gonna name it after my library. Yeah. Yes. Hi. What do you need? I don't know if you can see it, but she's like pawing at me. Come on. Yes. Come on up. Yes. Come on up. Come up. She can be kind of passive aggressive sometimes. All right, cats. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about here. Yeah, application name config. This feels better to me. Not that it again matters that much for the context of what we're looking at. This is their change. Oh, this is just a change log. I don't really care about that. Favicon is fine. All right. I think we're off to the races. We're gonna start it here. They don't have too much going on, and a little test file. Kind of neat. I'm glad that they put it in there. I wonder if that is in part. Like I wonder if they're using the tests in the template to check that it make sure it still works. Hi. Coming back to say hi. Okay, so we have, and we're not gonna look at the CSS because that's not gonna matter too much, but mostly what we're looking at is a React context in app, we're going to delete this. And app is using a hook from Jazz Tools React. 2 hooks, actually. And this, you'll see this show up in a bunch of places. It feels very much in the vein of like GraphQL-esque, where you write, you're telling it like what piece of data out of this blob of data you actually want, and then it sort of like figures out for you. Obviously, the main difference being that this is more local first, where GraphQL is more like making a query, and then the server you're making a query to understands GraphQL syntax and the DSL for that, then does the actual query or queries and returns the data. What? No. No. She's like sitting there going, I'm looking at the green screen. What are you going to do about it? What do you need? Come on up. Oh, kitties. So, I think we'll just give it a run here. Like within the app, then we don't have a components. We have a schema, and they got a little bit going on here. Part of which is the schemas themselves: code.profile, code.map, code.account, and you'll see they do throw Zod into the mix. So most of their schema, like generation or schema handling, is done through or in the context of a Zod schema. So z.date, z.string. And then there's this like with migration. So there's still a little bit of you need to handle a schema and you're defining it. And like, if you don't have data there, you need to like insert default data, basically. It's less specifically about like database schema migration is my from what I've seen. Stop. I think she's annoyed that I'm not giving her the head scratches. So we got a form and the auth button and then the main app. So there's really not too much going on here. So let's give it a run here real quick, and then we'll play around a little bit with the actual integration itself, and we'll see how it does the auth. Because again, I've mostly played around with the APIs and looking specifically at the TypeScript. I don't think I've actually gotten to the point where I ran something, but also like I was running it very much in the context of like, how does it feel to use it? Okay. As of today, you're 35 years old. Ugh. I feel old. What? Where is it getting that? What? What do you need? Come on up. Come. Come on up. Say hi. All right. So enter your first name. Chat. Welcome, chat. Oh, 1990, I guess. Wow. 26 years old? I mean, we're only in 2025, right? I feel like that's off by one. But so like either way, you can change the data in this form. You notice there's no submit button. So edit the form above, refresh this page, and your changes persist. So there is no submit button. And yeah, like okay, curiosity here. 0 years old, 1 year old. I guess that makes you 1. Maybe it isn't off by 1. Either way, no submit button. And that, I haven't actually clicked login, so we haven't tried that yet. And so we have an account schema that we're passing it, which comes from the schema in here. So you kind of build up this like overall account like setup. And this is the like overall piece. So you have this account. The account holds a profile and a root. I think that's the only thing that it can hold. Yeah, a profile and then a map. But root is like the root piece of data, like the root database, tied specifically to the that profile. So from here you can do so there's the Jazz profile that sets that, but the account root, in this case, they just do a date of birth. But you could do like nested stuff. So you can have, the account root be a list of to-dos and a list of other friends or something. I don't know. A list of notes or excuse me. Well, I mean, lists and feeds work too, but also like a map just to to-dos. So this can be, account root can be sort of this nested piece, and it's per user private. Yeah, where you can store top level objects for that user. Hi. Coming up. Come on. Yeah. We'll see if I can actually still reach my keyboard. Yeah. You're welcome. Okay. If she chills out, maybe she'll just kind of lay down on the keyboard here for a sec. Not on the keyboard, on the desk rather. Okay, so Jazz React Provider. We're passing it this information schema and then basically this like sync place. And that's all that's going on. Like internally, they're handling a bunch of stuff in that React context. So again, if you're interested in using the like outside of React, implementation details all sort of get hidden away in this, which is nice if you're using React and using it in a way that there's no benefit to knowing any of those implementation details. So, trade-offs, but you got to start somewhere, right? I don't fault them for specifically doing it this way, because like this is nice. They give you a couple hooks that you can use, and it just kind of works, and it demos really well. So there's this is authenticated. We are, authenticate to share the data with another device. So I think in this state we're not logged in, and there's different types of like not logged in status, and that is configurable. So we'll take a look at that in a minute. But what we're doing here is a get user age. And you can see here, it's just taking this root, which is kind of interesting because it's just like pulling data from this root blob. In this case, it doesn't matter too much because this, and there are things to consider performance-wise when you have a lot of data. in the context of like local first and sync engines, there are apps that benefit, like highly benefit from this architecture. If you're doing something like social media, where there is potentially lots of data that you could want to see, that benefits less from the idea of local first. So if you're thinking of like performance issues and how does this handle it, like how do I sync all this data, if you're making a social media type app, this may not be the appropriate architecture because you'd have to sync a lot of data potentially. But like when you're talking about just small pieces, like small objects that have been synced and are available, then you start to get to do this kind of stuff where you can just use a little helper that returns the data, which is kind of nifty. So that like this is one piece of it. You can, this is just like your data for your account. So it's just give me my data, and in this case it's resolving or just asking for the profile and the root. I don't know if there's other hooks or if there's other ways to like piece apart and get this data. But again, part of that is set up and built into that the React context here. And then that is authenticated, which sort of ties into that same React context. And profile, first name. So top level, not too much going on here. Where are we looking? Form. Here we go. Form. This is the other piece that I wanted to look at. When, again, there's no submit button, which is interesting because if there's no if there's no submit button, then obviously it's just doing it on change, right? But what's specifically interesting about it is that on change effectively like mutating the values. So it does the like immutable data store and allows you to just change the value directly, and then it handles all the it actually does need to be immutable, and you want to potentially have a history of changes in the background, which is kind of neat. And this type of engine, I think having that use, especially in the context of like a team, is valuable. Like expecting folks to do things immutably is that's a pretty high expectation, I would say. So having some guardrails or abstraction over that to where you can just use it and set values and not have to worry too much about it is kind of nice. I don't know though if like, so I'm assuming we get some TypeScript in here, right? It says it's a date. So if we just set it to like, here, let's just make this a string. So there's little type checking stuff in here, but I don't know like does stuff freak out if you blitz your types or you don't have TypeScript to actually help you out and you set a value that isn't of the appropriate schema type. I'm definitely kind of curious about how those internals handle that, but presuming you're using TypeScript and your types are good, it becomes relatively straightforward to just mutate it, basically. So that's cool. I think that is pretty highly valuable as far as how they set things up and how you'd use this in the context of a team. And I keep coming back to that because the other setups feel like, or the other alternatives feel like you have to build a whole abstraction around it to be able to use it in the context of a team, without the team being like without everybody on the team being deeply involved with and understanding all the implementation bits, you kind of have to have some sort of abstraction over it. Is the feeling that I get. So you'll get things like what's the other ones that we've tried on here? Do I have? We did Lauro, YJS, and AutoMerge in this one. So like, it feels like I've seen YJS for specific use cases, but not necessarily for like an overall app. So if you have somebody working on a specific piece of the app that is highly reliant on YJS, it seems fine because the people working on that are quite familiar with how to use it. But this feels like it's potentially in a place where you could just drop it in an app and have it be sort of controlling everything. Like this be literally a root piece of the app, both in concept, but in reality too. So I think that's pretty neat. So we've done. Let's see. We've gone through the create app flow and high level setup. Let's just cross that off right away because I didn't put that on the list. We want to look at the auth stuff. So let's look at passkey auth, and then kind of an extension from that, I want to look at I think we'll try out the passkey auth, and then we'll see the different auth states and options. In part because the options I think is potentially important depending on how you want to use this. But we'll talk more about that when we get to it. And then we might take depending on how much time we have, we might look at the React context and hooks directly. All right, let's try this passkey auth. I have no idea how this is going to work. In part because, I'm not sure what's going to show up. I've not actually done passkey stuff on this computer. As much as I do want to actually show this, I'm going to just flip over here and just see what happens when I click next, because I have no idea. Okay, QR code. I mean, I get it. I suppose let's try. We'll see. We'll see. So it's saying only connect to devices you trust, blah, blah, blah. The other device will sign you in with passkey from this device. So it is using either an iPhone, an iPad, or an Android to handle the passkey. And I really haven't gotten into... Oh. So my phone says devices couldn't connect. And... Interesting. The browser says that it did. I don't have anything particularly sensitive shown right now, but yeah. So you click the button, it gives you a QR code, you scan the QR code on your phone, and then, yeah. This flow, I think, works and the integration probably works a lot better on Mac, in part because if you have a Mac, like a MacBook, whatever, and you have a phone, iOS, iPad, something like that, those connections are a little bit stronger. But an Android to Windows box is, unless you specifically set it up, which I intentionally did not, it doesn't work quite as well. So like this is going to be a problem. Authenticate to share the data with another device. So like we're not going to be able to. Oh, I guess this is the other bit too. I clicked login. I haven't actually done that yet. So maybe if I click sign up, let's go back here again. We'll try it again, but we'll do sign up instead. Didn't actually differentiate between one or the other. Like it just said, yeah, we'll try it. Sure. Yeah, I'm getting the same issue. I don't know what okay. Yep. I don't know that we're actually gonna get that to work. So same issue. Sign up and log in work exactly the same. But I mean, I guess that being said, we can dig into a little bit. What we'd be able to see here is we'd get the ability to do a log out, and then there's going to be a state, sign, or the buttons can switch from log in to log out. So we would, right now we're seeing sign up and log in. Instead, we would see log out. So like we're not entirely missing that much. And we would get, I guess, on the main app, it would just say you're logged in instead of the authenticate, which is fine. So that being said, it feels like it's sort of like a base level implementation, in part because if you want to have more like overall user management, now if they would build it into like the Jazz dashboard and the Jazz tools, you are effectively competing with something like Clerk. So why not work with them and be more of a host, which is the vibe that I'm getting. So they like from how I'm understanding it is, if you're going to use the passkey, it can work if you're okay relying only on WebAuth as the mechanism for users to sign in, which is pretty well supported. WebView Android is not got a bunch of stuff. But Chrome Android is probably more likely in use, maybe. And most of the others, so like Samsung Internet. So I would say probably Chrome, Android, and Samsung Internet are probably going to be the big ones. And like if we're talking in the context of like Tori, you're gonna have to potentially think about that because you're using web views. So that could be a problem. Like you might have to, as a demo and a thing that they can enable for folks just to play around with and try it, it's fine. And I think that's the intention, is just a base level thing, just to give folks a place to play around with without having to sign up for another third party thing. It just so happens that doing it at Windows with my specific setup is not convenient for that, which is fine. So there's passkey is the secure biometric. Then there's the passphrase. Can we use this? Okay. So we could potentially try this. Word list. Okay, so I guess they have two options. You can either use the passkey or the passphrase, or just go like full user management, which I think is a good trade-off. Again, like it doesn't feel like it makes sense for them to use a full-blown. Oh, their provider is a clerk specific one. Interesting. But yeah, like it doesn't seem like it makes sense to have a full-blown user management system that they have to build out. Okay, so we can potentially try the passphrase. It's very similar. Let's give it a shot. So let's try swapping over to passphrase and see if we can get a sign in, and we'll go from there. So the Jazz React provider, is that still valid? We have an auth model here, implementation. It doesn't specifically say anything about needing to change the thing that wraps your app. I guess here, this is saying, there's a clerk provider. Jazz provider is this one. Got it. And that has a use clerk. Got it. So the way they're wrapping it this way is that clerk provider is coming from clerk. They have a hook and a provider. The hook returns information, like basically that like user client. Then the provider needs to wrap anything that ends up requiring it. So they put that on the outside, which means that then this Jazz provider, which is not imported directly, it's this custom function, they're using a specific Jazz React context to work with the clerk integration, and it allows passing this handle to the clerk, which comes from the hook. So this makes sense why they have to have a specific implementation, because they need to kind of pass all that hook along. So we have a Jazz React provider, and then we have a use account and is authenticated. From what I've seen, I don't think either of those matter. It looks like everything's contained here in the auth button. So we have a use account, which is got a logout. Then we have a use passkey auth, which is basically doing this. So if we instead pull in this, I don't know what the word list is. I mean, sure. Okay, you need support? Yeah, okay. Older browsers without WebAuthn capabilities. So if you need to do something WebView related, you might need to go this route or have a full-blown like user management thing. You can use it as a fallback, which is kind of interesting. Anyone, I mean, a passphrase is equivalent to, like, it's kind of just marketing over the fact that you're using a password. Yeah, requires users to enter a potentially long phrase. Sure, basically a password. Okay. So if we pull this in, I don't know where this word list
or like what's the intent of the word list. It doesn't actually say anywhere. But if we go like this, I don't think the application name actually matters here, but the and state passphrase use. So it takes an app name, an app host name, and a word list. So it does still take the app name. I'm going to pass it. It doesn't seem to specifically complain. Oh, wait, what? App name. Use passphrase auth. Passphrase. Okay, well, I guess it doesn't. I guess it doesn't take it. So their docs are wrong there. Okay, well. And then word list. I don't know what. Const word list equals. Well, equal. Okay, where's my equals button? This one equals. Hi. Hello. Whoop. Is that spelled right? I don't think that's spelled right, but what's another hola. Hola. How do you spell hola? Hola. Hola. I'm not gonna write the accent marks, but we'll go with that. Now, word list. No idea what that means. It feels weird that I don't know if word list is actually related at all in any way to the phrase that you can generate, but I guess we'll find out. Word list. Expected array of 2048 strings. What? Why? So I guess it isn't just a password. I mean, so from a consumer point of view, a passphrase in my mind is just a marketing around the fact that like you have to write a password, and remembering a bunch of words chained together is easier than just remembering random characters. And it in theory has more. I mean, you tend to use then at that point dictionary words, which is not great. But just the fact that you have more characters provides enough additional entropy to make it past that threshold of like you using dictionary words being a problem. So like just the fact that it's easier to get a like a mangled password of random characters that's hard to remember, that's only 8 characters long, is less strong than like 4 dictionary words stuck together, just because you have more characters. But I wonder if they're doing more. Is there, let's see. So there's, I guess, something specific to the implementation of it. I mean, it feels weird that it wouldn't let you set it. It must be doing some like, yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to look to see specifically what they're doing. I mean, for just playing around with it, it's fine. Let's just do here. We'll do English. This is a lot, and this is in a JSON file. Here we'll go. I guess we kind of need to put it in here, word list. Word list.ts. And we'll do const. We'll just export default equals this. Actually, I think I copied that. Yep. Okay. Big thing. Export. Yes. Is that it? Did I get the right syntax? Okay. I don't. It gets to the point where you use default exports so seldom these days that I don't really think about it anymore. Word list from word list. There we go. Okay. Now this. So refresh, login, invalid passphrase. Sure. So sign up. Oh, cool. I'm logged in. Okay. Got it. So there's a little bit of a different use. So we have a here. Let's just copy this into here so we can look at it side by side. We'll make this a TypeScript. Put it side by side. Okay. Why are you having a problem with that? Oh, imports. Yeah, imports. Sure, it's fine. So we have a use account. Login passphrase. So what's a little bit different is you have, in the context of a pass key, you don't need to like ask a user to enter a thing. They just like it's operating system or browser level implementation. So you just like click a button and then it does all this stuff in the background and you don't have to think about it, which also does kind of demo well because you don't have to generate as much code to get somebody signed in. So we actually, I just want to grab this because we have a passphrase auth. I'm going to just pull this over because we don't really have a, let's see, log out, auth.sign up, auth login. I don't specifically see a log out button, which is interesting. But I think the gist of what we want is here. So let's pull this in. So if we're signed in, it'll say just you're signed in. So that would be this. It's weird that there's no handle logout. I'm going to keep that because I feel like I would want that. But handle sign up and handle login, I do potentially need to do more with. So we're going to go like this. And we're going to move these up. So now we have a handle sign up, handle login, handle log out. And we have an on open. Those are being passed. On open change and open. What is this coming from? Okay, passphrase example. Oh no, I want to see the code. Okay, we're gonna have to look at the examples, I guess. Passphrase example is what we want to look at. Reactions, collaborative, to-do list. So it mentioned that the to-do list, here's a pass key. I don't see the passphrase. Okay. Well, let's look at the to-do list, I guess. Invite button. That's the other thing. You can do invite links. So coming back to the idea of like user management and what Jazz is pushing forward, it's interesting because the um being able to share the data with another person is kind of an expectation at this point. And as soon as you start talking end-to-end encryption, handling that and doing that becomes complicated in a way that isn't. I mean, like auth and encryption are always complicated at some level, but like it's a different type of complicated than handling it. Like if the server was just sort of dealing with it, because if the server has no knowledge of like what the data is or who has access to it or anything, you have to handle that all through like the encryption. So it is like truly local first sharing at some point if you are doing like full end-to-end encryption and the server has no knowledge of how, like what that is, how it's put together, who has access to it. I think they actually have it. We could potentially look at it if we have enough time, but you can send invite links to other people, and I don't think it uses the server. Okay, I don't on OpenChange. I don't think we care about that. Let's just take that out for right now. And I guess we need to. Quick fix. Import from React. There we go. I don't know why I wasn't doing that. We'll move that up and we'll. So can I set this? It seems to expect it in the example, but that seems to not be correct. So I'm going to just take it out. Let's see if this works real quick. Okay. Yeah, so I mean this looks kind of wild, but okay, so like this whole thing is my passphrase. Your current passphrase. I have stored my passphrase. Log in with your passphrase. So if I just like copy this, I don't know how much this matters, but just in case. And I have stored my passphrase. Now it says I'm logged in. So log out. Log in with your passphrase. So you can fill it in and then click login. Okay, and then it ties it to that previous state. Interesting. I don't mind it, but I definitely do feel like this is a case where this feels like it's a case where it would be helpful to have user management in place. Okay, I think we can potentially. What did we say we were going to do? Passkey auth. I think we can cross that off. We tried the passkey and actually passphrase. I think next we're going to look at the different auth states, but I'm going to take a real quick break. I'm going to be right back. Where's my button? There we go. I'm going to be right back real quick, and then we'll continue with these last couple auth state stuff and maybe looking at the React context. We got maybe about 20 minutes, so be right back.
Okay. Cat hair all the time. The CSS isn't pretty, uh, but honestly, whatever. We're logged in. It seems to work. I see now what they're saying with the passphrase. It's basically taking from a list of those words, just like generating you a massive password. So it's not purely like you fill in a password. It just makes it for you, kind of. Um, so yeah, honestly, I think if I would personally use this, I'm probably going to end up pulling in Clerk, because having the ability to do email, password, uh, social logins, and multi-factor auth, I think are going to be important. And especially since there's enough like options out there to just drop them in. They specifically have an integration with Clerk, which it looks like the way they have it set up, you'd have to do that for any. There's going to have to be an OAuth. Well, I guess not OAuth integration specifically, but a user management system hook or way to hook into it. So you're gonna have to do something like this, which I don't know. It's fine. So I think if we're gonna do auth, if I would use this personally in an app, and I'm gonna do auth, I would probably pull in Clerk, because the things that I would personally like to do with it, I don't think the passphrase or the pass key is going to be sufficient enough. Again, maybe as a fallback, but also I think this starts to tie nicely into the different auth states and options, because there is, asking somebody to sign in is one thing, but you could potentially use it outside of that. There is this authentication states page, and they have these, I guess, 3 different states: anonymous, authenticated, and guest mode. Guest mode is a thing that you can turn on. So actually, if you look here, guest mode is you have no account, but you only have, it doesn't require an account, would maybe be a better way to say it. No account requirement, but you only have read access to public content. So depending on your use case, might actually be useful. So they can browse data. So if there's some public data set that folks would want to see, and you don't want to have folks, part of it too is if you're using something like Clerk, you're paying effectively per user. There's tiers or cliffs or whatever you want to call them, where you hit a certain amount of monthly active users, you bump up in cost. If all they need to be, if all a user wants is to see some public data, it might not be worth requiring them to make an account, because you'd end up having to pay for them as a potentially active user, even though they might just be browsing some data that would not gain value from that. So it seems like guest mode is a thing you could turn on and off. But the other state would be the anonymous authentication. So you're technically, I believe, getting a account automatically, and that persists on that one device with the ability to upgrade it to a full account. So I think the intent here is that if I want to be able to take this data and use it on other devices, there's no manual sync option or any way that you can get around it that way. It would basically require the user to upgrade to a full account, which I don't dislike.
But being able to do a little bit more with the anonymous authentication might be nice for some cases. Because they still have like a full account. So I don't know if like just somebody landing on the page, is that going to generate them an account on Clerk? I mean, that could be a case for like where guest mode would be nice. It's easily upgraded, which is neat. Oh, data syncs across the network if enabled. Interesting. So that I think this is probably the bit that I would be curious about is what's the difference between these two and like how tied is it into things? Because if like one of the tenets of local first obviously is that you deal with the data local first. But there is still some like just because you deal with the data local first doesn't mean that you only want to like store it or have it only contained within a single device. I potentially want to look at an app on my desktop and on my phone. You could still adhere to the tenets of local first and allow the user to only sync across their local network. And if it never leaves their actual network, you're still likely able to check many of the like local first ideal boxes. Because there's like a lot of inherent privacy with the fact that like it never leaves a person's network. There's public versus private networks, and you got to start to think about that stuff. But like if we can do anonymous authentication for a user and just allow them to sync the data across the network, if they don't actually ever want to get to the point where they have a full account that they would, say pay for or whatever, if they could just sync it across the network and it doesn't cost infrastructure, that's kind of a neat, no pun intended, state to be in. So when they sign up, they get their account transparently upgraded. Yeah. So like this is something that kind of keep in mind. You might potentially need to like handle some special states. And okay, so apparently you can configure some of that with the Jazz React provider. Again, guest mode is enable or disable. Like you can opt in or opt out. And you can control the sync too. Okay, so which is then inherently tied to that. Yeah. So if you have it set to always, it will sync for both anonymous and authenticated. And this controls network sync. So I'm definitely curious what it means by network sync. And at some point we might actually just need to look at the code to understand that. But like here, this makes the app work in local mode when using the anonymous authentication. So interesting. So you could disable the network sync for local only. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. To try your app locally only, incurring no sync traffic. So this is definitely an interesting, like if to sync, if it requires a persistent connection to a WebSocket endpoint, that implies then that if we would want to enable something that's like progressively enhanced local first, where you could go from local only to network only, at some point you have to get to the point where you're using some infrastructure somewhere and somebody has to pay for that infrastructure. This seems to be kind of your local only or your sync server. So local only, or you pay for infrastructure. If you're paying for the infrastructure, the user, but by setting it to always, they will sync even if they're anonymous, which means you're paying for the infrastructure for the anonymous user. But I don't. It still doesn't quite point out what that like. What does that mean in the context of like? When you say incurs sync traffic, if you have it set to always sync, even for anonymous users, does that mean that they can sync between devices? Because if they're anonymous, there's no way to tie that data to. I mean, there is technically a user. They say anonymous. It's just like you haven't filled in the name field. Is the reality here? But if you haven't filled in the name field, there's no way to open it up on your phone and have it sync across, right? It's not 100% clear, but that's the vibe that I'm getting, that if you're doing anonymous authentication, if you want to, like you could set it to only sync when they've signed up, which might be fine. So it's local only until that point. But I mean, having a little bit more control over this would potentially be interesting, because like in the context of a Tori app, in theory, this is something that you could run. Like they say that it's open source, that you can run a DIY. You could, in theory, have a sync server in a Tori app, in which case this peer could potentially be dynamic, where if you want to have it be a local sync, you could point to that versus not. So I don't know that there's, like, we're signed in, we got this, like, we've been upgraded. There is some data being passed somewhere. But there's no more like, I mean, this is like deep as far as the actual encryption part of it, but there's no more information on like sort of these, I don't know if I would call it in between, but like when you look at something like the authentication states docs, and you say, I want to sync for peer and when. Peer implies that you can have multiple peers, right? I mean, it might be something that they are potentially envisioning at some point and just have not implemented. But I could see potentially a Jazz React provider having a dynamic peer. So depending on the context, you could potentially sync to one peer versus the other. But do they have a peer can mean a few things, because there's like central authority type sync engines, and there's the central authority is really not a central authority and really it's just another peer type sync. So like if you use YJS, putting a server in the mix is just another peer that can potentially hold the state or otherwise be signed in all the time to keep that state. And then each peer, either locally or on the server, it has some expectation to be able to persist it. So the server is less of a central authority and more of a peer that is just also persisting it. So that's probably, from what I've read in the docs, that's probably my biggest question is what they've provided makes sense from like a like initial implementation, demos well, gets the job done, will work for most teams type setup. But if you want to potentially do more with and try to like really hone in on your local first implementation, doing more around the anonymous authentication and enabling that without having to end up paying for the infrastructure is potentially a place to dive into. And just from the docs, it's not entirely clear what they're envisioning there. So I think that would probably be my biggest question is like, how flexible can we get with this? And if you have multiple like if you have multiple sync targets, are they actually like just up here? Is it going to figure stuff out if I'm syncing both to like on my local network and also to a central authority? Like, could there be a state where I upgrade an authenticated account, but my internet goes out on my home? Can I still sync locally, and then that gets synced up to the server once the internet comes back? I think that those would be the deep questions that I would be curious about that aren't currently answered by the docs. And they don't. I mean, like, I wouldn't entirely expect them to have enabled this already, to be clear. But some indication on like what they're expecting to support would be interesting, I think. Because this, I mean, it's just strictly based off of the terminology here. Peer implies that you could potentially have multiple, is how I'm reading it. So at some point, we might just have to look at the code to see what they're doing there. But that is definitely not something we can dive in deeply today. I mean, that's literally the next checkbox on our list here. We got a little bit of time. We can jump in there real quick and poke, I think. But we're not going to be able to really dive in here. So they've got a monorepo. As far as I can tell, they have the bulk of all of their code here. They have some base level stuff, including some persistent type bits. So there's some expectation that you can persist. So the fact that they have ways to persist, and also they say sync peer, I'm like, but the vibe I'm getting is that central authority or the info that you could pay for would be potentially in addition to the ability to like okay. Can you weird? I think my audio chain just crashed. It appears that my sound is back though. Okay. Well, maybe actually I had music playing. It seems the music app might have just crashed, which might have taken down my audio chain or vice versa, one of the two. But it looks like I'm sending audio. So yeah, I think we might be good. So weird. All right. Never had that happen before. So everything that I'm seeing from their docs and from their terminology that they use in values that you're passing tells me that there's some eventuality that you can have a little bit more customization with the like local sync type stuff, which is really interesting to me. So if we look specifically at the here's the passphrase auth. This is the package React auth. I mean, I thought this was going to be a React context, but this is actually a component. Passphrase auth basic UI. So there's some built-in UI stuff that you could potentially pull in, it looks like, which is kind of neat. Okay, here, provider is the top level thing. Jazz React provider is what we were looking at. And we've got guest mode, sync storage. Okay. Log out replacement. Okay. And here's that anonymous account discarded. So if they upgrade from an anonymous account to an signed in authenticated account, whatever they call it, if you had previous state in the anonymous mode, that would be discarded. So if that happens, you potentially want to do something with that. Ask the user, hey, you had this state previously. Do you still want to keep it? Do you want to add it to your account, basically? That could be potentially an option. But that is a lot more stuff to handle. Okay, so Jazz Browser Context Manager is sort of this state level piece, and it looks like they're dumping it in the React state. Use anonymous fallback is in part, looks like it's in part dependent on the enable SSR. Here's some props, and it's doing a create context. I don't think this is actually React context though. So context manager.create context. I think it's just firing off a function and starting it up, basically. It looks like it's doing a .catch, so it looks like it's a promise. And then it returns a subscription. There's a use callback and use sync external store. So you end up subscribing to the state, and anytime you change, you get the current value, which is, I'm guessing, the state of everything. Okay, so then we have the provider, and then we have the context manager context provider. And where is that coming from? So both those are React Core. Okay, so we got some React Core stuff going on too. Where does that show up is the question. Better auth. React Core, here we go. Okay, so that's literally just setting up that top level thing. Passphrase auth. Using external store. Okay, so this is that. Yeah, it's a hook, but then this hook also uses the other hook, which is doing an auth method load current account passphrase, and then subscribing to that. Okay, so they basically have these help, or they have these top level classes, and those end up handling the sync, and then you just can subscribe to them. So if we look at passphrase auth, that's coming from Jazz Tools, and if we go back here, yep, Jazz Tools, React Provider. These were coming from, if we look at Jazz Browser Context Manager, comes from browser. But this is also kind of interesting too, because they have a browser like package-ish thing. I'm assuming that's in part because they have, it's like either using browser or using Expo. So using this in the context of React Native is probably slightly different. So this Jazz Browser Context Manager is a class, and this implements some of this like top level stuff that ends up allowing and handling this sync. Yep. Here's the sync modes. A bunch of inputs. Create KV store. And create. So if you look at create browser context, this is when we start getting into, here's listeners, setting up some listeners, setting up peers in this like WebSocket connection stuff. So add peer, remove peer, peers to load from. So it looks like you could potentially have multiple peers, which is very interesting. So depending if you're turning on network mode or not, you end up having, and then there's a browser guest context, and there's a set up peers. Provide browser lock session, create invite link, parse invite link. So it's doing some pulling out information from that hash. So the invite link is effectively like embedding permissions type stuff and giving some indication on like if a user clicks and create invite. Yeah. So like is tied, an invite link is tied to the group, and you're like adding them to the group. And it pulls out this invite secret from the from that. Create a Jazz context. And here's the create Jazz browser context. So it is creating the context, and then it has a done. And this is just a function. At some point too, like these start to get into private APIs. So if we were wanting to do something that was outside of the like React context that they're giving you, it might not actually make sense to use some of these. But this starts to get into the piece. I was slightly curious what they're using for subscriptions. Like, is it, are they doing generators or observables, or what are they doing, et cetera, et cetera. But in reality, like, they do a bunch of the work internally that then they're able to wire up to a React context, and that's where you can use it. So and these like core pieces, specifically in the browser, could then be used. So like they have a Svelte, and I saw folks working on an unofficial Vue implementation. So if the way they have it set up, it looks like they're intending to eventually support all the frameworks, or at least all the big ones, to where the wiring that you need to do and the use of it, you could, even if you're just doing like vanilla JS, you can make use of it, and then potentially they give you additional helpers on top of it to make it even easier to use. And that's in the context of React. That's React context. No pun intended, I guess. I'm excited to play more with this. It seems cool. I think if I'm going to use it in any specific situation, we're going to have to probably pull in Clerk, which isn't the end of the world, but it's definitely a decision point. It is very much though like other options where if you provide a whole ton of helpers in React and React context, uh, at some point you've given so many helpers to where your app has to basically be a GUI over the top of a database, which that isn't uncommon. But if you want to do anything, and being more flexible, you want to potentially not have so many helpers and have the flexibility to, use some of the internal bits. And it seems like they're potentially set up to allow that. It's just the documentation isn't at that point yet, which is, not to be, it's not unexpected or anything. So I think that's where we're going to call it. This was, I've been wanting to look at this for a while. I wish I would have taken the time earlier. But honestly, I don't know that I would have been in a place where I could use it anyways. So even if we would have touched on it earlier, I don't know that would have mattered. But in some ways, we gave it a little time to cook. I am glad that we did it though. I'm not sure what we're gonna do next week. Maybe some other local first stuff, but we've hit on all the sync engines and local first type libraries that were at the top of my list. So I guess where do we go from here? Good question. Hit the subscribe button. I will put up a new stream for next week. We stream every Tuesday. So I'll see you then. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. Bye.